Well, hello there. So, today on That's Why, I'm going to be talking about how you can teach amazing, engaging STEAM to large classrooms and audiences. So, thanks for joining me today on That's Why. Okay, so this video actually comes in response to two of my educators. So in our Facebook group, Lisa Ann says, "This year I'll be teaching classes that are larger than I normally have in the past. I'm looking for guidance and some ideas. What kind of lessons have you done with your larger classes?" And I'll have 24 first graders, tips and tricks for managing projects with classes that size, and then also our very own fierce and fearless STEAM educator, Dawn from Sheraton Public Library says here, if you have any quick guidelines for me as I teach groups of 50 kids for 50 minutes starting Wednesday, I'm game to hear. So, of course, Dawn and Lisa Ann, we have a couple of things in help to give you some help. Both Jennifer and I have taught large groups. I've taught large groups, crowds, and so on. And so hopefully today we will give you some tips and pointers on that. So I'm going low tech today. I'm going to be using note cards because this is just, the way we roll. I got this email this afternoon and I thought I better make a video of it now. First thing, when you're planning activities, they are activities. Active is the key ingredient. When it comes to large audiences, you're the small person in the room. So it's really about thinking about things that kids can do, okay? So what I want you to focus on are the skills that are involved in that, not the content, but what are the skills, the 4 C's, what's one of them that you're going to have your kids practice. Now, at the beginning of the year, practicing individual skills, not all 4 C's, is important. And just a reminder for those of you who are wondering what the 4 skills are: communicate, critically think, create, and collaborate. So when you're diving into these activities, which one of those 4 C's might you be focusing on today? Okay, are they creating, collaborating, communicating, or critically thinking? It's easier, especially at the beginning of the year, to just focus on one. Class, today we're going to practice critically thinking. Boom. What's that on the board? Some compelling picture. What are you thinking about it? Write it down in your T-chart. What are the things you observe? What are the questions that you have, right? Class, today we're going to work on collaborating. So once we're done with the learning cue, we're going to work together in groups for you to build this thing, okay? Class, today we're working on creating things. So I'm going to want you to create, like in a Makerspace, this thing that does this thing. Get the idea? Focus on one of those things. You don't want to always focus on all 4. That can be really overwhelming, especially at the beginning of the year when kids are just getting to the point where it's like, what does critical thinking look like to you? What does creating look like to you? What does collaborating look like to you? How do we communicate with each other, right? Okay, so the other thing I invite you to think about is maximizing interactions in these groups. So interactions is really key. And when I talk about interactions, I'm not talking about teacher-student interactions. With large groups, there's too much going on. So your biggest superpower and thing you want to leverage in this interactions is student-student interactions, interactions with other students. Think, pair, shares work really well here. On your own, think of this thing and write it down, or think of it in your mind, turn to the person next to you, and pair and share that thing, and then we're going to share out in a large group, okay? Think, pair, shares, group to group, student to student, small groups are going to be powerful, especially because you've got this large amount of people to deal with, right? People to manage, okay? So interactions with other students, interactions between student and content, working with things with your hands, building things, right? Thinking about things. Those are all content and things, like I said. So working with content, working with things, notice it's not about you. And then also leveraging spaces. If you're able to have big spaces, it may help to put tape on the ground to designate certain places to do things. Like, for instance, when our students do catapults, I designate a space in the classroom where they throw the catapults. When kids are building slime, there's a place for them to use glitter. There's a place for them to design their experiments. Spaces are a great way for kids to actually dictate what activity they're going to be doing in those spaces. So you don't have to do the directing. The kids do the directing to go to where they need to be. Okay? Now, the change up in that is that your role actually changes. You're no longer the giver of information. The students are going to get the information through the kinds of interactions and the spaces that you set up. Your role is to walk around and take pictures of the wonderful active things that your students are doing. Taking photos is a great way to show people the learning that's involved, especially because the learning looks very different than everybody sitting together doing worksheets. Okay? It's also a great way to advocate for the active learning that's happening in your class. And kids love seeing their photos of them doing things, right? It reinforces the social norms of active learning. Okay? Your other role is to ask questions. What do you see? Why are you thinking that? Can you say more about that? Do you understand what you're being asked to do? The other thing that you do is empower. So as kids are doing and learning, you're walking around and trying to make yourself as available as possible. You're scanning the room, okay? The kids are doing the work. You're the facilitator, and you empower your students. How do you empower? You ask them questions. Have you asked so-and-so? Where can you go to find that information? Did you see someone else's project? Go over there, take a look at what they're doing. Ask them questions. You're giving them prompts to help them dive more into the information and the interaction. The other thing is, because you have students for a short time, right, and you have a lot of students, you need to rely on routines. In fact, your first couple days, it's about teaching kids routines, right? What do you do at the start? What do you do during class time? Where do you go during class time? And then, really important for STEAM classrooms, how do you clean up? How do you clean up? What are your routines? And make sure everybody knows those routines, okay? Routines are going to help you get through material, not get through material, but they're going to help you navigate these activities quickly. Okay, here's what I suggest for any class period, especially if you're thinking about whether or not you've got an hour or if you've got 50 minutes. The routine is the first 5 to 10 minutes, use a QOD. QOD stands for question of the day. For those of you that are in Fierce and Fearless, this is your learning cue. You kickstart the beginning of class with a learning cue, okay? Some sort of expectation or orientation. Class, today we're building catapults. Class, I want you to take a look at what's on the board and answer the question, right? Start it every day, every time you meet with them with a QOD. Here's your routine. Takes about 5 to 10 minutes, okay? 20 to 30 minutes then is going to be resourcing. Resourcing meaning students find and evaluate the information. They do the experiment. They do the activity. They're synthesizing the information that they're finding and making meaning out of it. And they're recontextualizing. I could do a whole thing on recontextualizing. Recontextualizing, taking information from one source and then changing it and translating it into another thing. Creating something with it, doing a challenge with it. These are all recontextualizing activities. In Fierce and Fearless, that program, we call it SCR, Synthesis, Evaluation, and Recontextualizing. All of that happens in this 20 to 30 minutes. This is the bulk of your teaching, okay? And notice it's mostly kids doing things, building things, making things, communicating with each other. All right. Then after that you always want to save 10 minutes for what I call kuapa. 10 minutes. Clean up and put away. Teach your students that routine. How do we clean up and put away? How do we clean up and put away? Where do things go? Where do you need to be? And when you are done with kuapa, clean up and put away, you have 5 minutes to do some sort of reflection or evaluation. Usually I have kids do a plus and arrow, or I have them think about something they want to share when we circle up in a large group. Okay, it could be a post-it or an exit ticket where you write some takeaway and you pop it on the board. Okay, all of these things, 5 minutes for some sort of reflective activity to really say, hey, think about what you just did and what was important from it. Reflection and evaluation, those two things are so important. They often get left out. You want to make sure that you put that in your class, okay? Now, what are activities that lend themselves to large groups? My go-to absolutely are STEM challenges. Build something, create something. Makerspaces, STEM challenges, great with that. My go-to person for STEM challenges, actually two, Kerry Tracy's Feel Good Teaching Stuff and Vivify STEM. I will include the links so that you have those so that you can go to them. For those of you who are in the Fierce and Fearless program, that's already in there. Check out your Thinkific site. You can plan your whole year on these STEM challenges, okay? And passion projects. Passion projects are things that kids do. Maybe your entire, SER period where they're resourcing and recontextualizing is doing research, building and making things in the service of a passion project that they show to the public, okay? And then finally, here's the other thing, because I know 50 minutes, a half hour sometimes totally isn't enough. Your next thing is to go digital, okay? Extend the projects. Have them show their reflections, on a Flipgrid, for example, or on a Padlet, something like that, where they can actually, extend the period. For those of you that do library programs and after-school programs, this Go Digital could be a sheet or a handout that goes home with the student to say, hey, QPs, key people, adults who help support their students, QPs, this is what we did in class. Here are, I love to include links with QR codes. Here are things that you can do with your student at home. Watch this video, do this experiment, try this thing. Different ways to extend the learning outside of class. Okay, I know that this was a total quick and dirty way of giving you a ton of tips and tricks to reach large audiences. Hopefully this was really helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, feel free to write your questions in the comments. Leave a comment for me, and I will be more than happy to answer that for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Oh, and if you really like this video, could you please do me the favor of liking, subscribing, and sharing, because it really does a lot for us to be able to share our work and help tons of teachers all over the world. Thanks again for watching, everybody. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. Bye.